But here are my top 5. For me, the characteristics that really define a leader who is inclusive and who is fair include a leader who is humble. And I'll tell you a quick story about this. I was doing some executive coaching with a very successful partner at a law firm, a litigator who had just incredible success, an incredibly successful record in his litigation practice. And he really was genuinely interested in increasing diversity, especially in terms of gender, especially in terms of people of color, and with a specific focus, because the most underrepresented groups in almost every industry, and certainly this is true in law firms, are women of color. And one of the things that we did, we used an assessment that I use in my work. And one of the things that the assessment measures is strengths. What are the behaviors, the strengths that you tend to use that have been successful for you, that have really made it your go-tos, that have made you successful? So we were looking at those. And one of the things that I started exploring with him was this idea of, do you understand that relying only on those strengths is certainly one way to succeed, but it's not the only way to succeed? And I told him that because I started seeing a pattern that for him, anyone who didn't exhibit those same strengths or those same characteristics wasn't possible. It wasn't possible in his mind that this person could be as successful. And so I've seen this over and over, and this is certainly an example of it, where as humans, we tend to overvalue the strengths, which are the ones that have led us to success, and we tend to undervalue those that are different from the ones that have led us to success. And so the lesson in humility here is, this is again a litigator, somebody who maybe, under normal circumstances is a bit combative. In fact, his strengths were things like competitiveness and aggression. But the level of humility that I saw in him in saying, I never thought about it that way, and how often he said to me, have I maybe given someone an evaluation that was less than stellar, not because they weren't good attorneys, but simply because I was judging them by the way in which I have succeeded. And so this idea of being able to acknowledge, that you can do better, that we're all on a journey. This humility is really, to me, the key one. And I've got it first, both because it goes with my framework, but also because I do think it's probably the most important of all of them. So many of you said this one, but definitely the ability to be empathetic, the ability to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and be able to see it from their perspective. For me, the person in my life who has really grown in empathy is my husband. I obviously married him because he's a wonderful man, but the level of empathy that he's been able to gain by being married to a Salvadoran immigrant and really marrying into an entire family of Salvadoran immigrants has been incredible. And in fact, so much so, there are, story after story that I have during our marriage where he has said to me, I never understood what it was like, the bias that you all encounter, until I actually crossed the border with you and saw that you got hassled by immigration in a way that I never have been. Or when somebody made a stereotype about, my son in terms of, his qualifications for college. And what's interesting to me is that level of empathy, being able to walk in another's shoes, at least in my husband's case, has resulted in two things. Number one, now he's convinced he's Salvadoran. He says things like, I hate the way that we're portrayed in the media. It's really demeaning. He's full Italian, by the way, and very proud of it. But now he's really just become so empathetic and can understand what it's like to be Salvadoran so much that he actually says things like that. So humility and empathy are going to be at the top of the list. Audacious. This one to me is also so key. Boldness and courage. And this is what I've seen so often in the work that I've been doing, in particular over the last few months. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So I'm launching tons of surveys, employee sentiment surveys. And there are two examples that come to mind where I really see this level of courage that I've not seen before. Something has definitely changed. One is an entity who really said to my partner and I, we want to know what it's like to be a brown employee, a Black employee, a gay employee, a transgender employee. We want to know. So we suggested a battery of questions that had to do with discrimination. Have you ever felt discriminated against? If so, for what reason? If so, what is it that happened? Did you ever witness one of your colleagues being discriminated against? I sort of held my breath. I still am a lawyer, and I knew that the legal counsel was going to object to it. And initially they did. But the point of the story is, in the end, they said to us, we're going to think about it. And I got this email that just shocked me, but in a very pleasant way, from the lawyer and the chief HR officer saying, you know what? We want to know. We understand that there are, things that might be scary for us in asking those types of questions. But if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right, and we'd rather know. And one of the sayings that I often go back to when it comes to this, being audacious and knowing that you've got to confront problems, is being a Latina and being very influenced by Spanish sayings. There's one that says, "El sol no se tapa con un dedo," which is, you can't cover the sun with one finger. It's there. You're not going to do this and be able to get rid of it. And so the level of boldness and courage that so many of my clients are showing, and people that I see who are doing things that are really outside the norm, is something that is incredibly heartwarming to me. Because after all, the problem is there, and you trying to hide it is not really going to make it go away. It's simply robbing you of the opportunity to fix it in a way that's good for your organization. And then the last two are real and tireless, which, as you can see now, you can understand why the graphic is there. So having heart, being real, being authentic. I, often say that employees have a very well honed BSO meter. They know if you're doing something simply because you think it's the right thing to do or the right thing to say, but don't actually have your heart in it. If you walk the walk, but you don't talk the talk. So being real, being authentic, being genuine is absolutely key. And keep in mind that these are, I'm talking about them in the sense of, this is what a leader looks like, but it's also what an organization looks like. An organization has to be humble enough to say, we have not gotten it right in the past. We thought that we were really embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion, but now we're looking at the numbers that haven't moved. We're looking at exit interview information that says that people sometimes left because they felt excluded or like an outsider, and we want to do better. So keep in mind that all of these are equally true from an organizational perspective as they are from an individual leader perspective. And then being tireless, understanding that this is not a one and done endeavor, that it is going to be a continuous improvement process. So I want you to keep those in mind in terms of, we know what the problem is. We know what the strategies, the big picture ways in which we want to solve these issues are. But now it's time for action. What must we actually do in order to be able to move the needle when it comes to DEI?